Hello everyone. My aim in creating this course was to provide critically important information that is optimized for beginners without the unnecessary information overload that comes when you are trying to learn a program like Revit. Revit is so complex that even though I try to give only absolutely necessary information, the whole course is almost 13 hours long. So I have divided it into more parts for easier orientation. At the end of the whole course, you will be able to create documentation like the one you see in the background. In the second part of the course, I will talk about selection, snaps, modify tools, most important shortcuts to speed your workflow, about how to measure in Revit, a little bit about dimensions, and height isolate mode and why it is important. So without any hesitation, let's just start right away. Now let's talk about selecting and selection methods in Revit. So first of all, if you want to select something, you just hover with your cursor over it and you can see that it will highlight in blue to preview you the selection which you want to create or do. So you can see that here it is selecting or previewing me the ball, and if I hover around another wall you can see that I have a preview of the next wall. If I hit my mouse button I will select this wall. So this way I can go and select different elements inside of Revit. Now if I want to add to my selection, I will press down and hold my Control key, and this way I am adding to the selection of elements in Revit. If I want to remove something from the selection, I will press and hold down my Shift key, and this way I am removing from the selection in Revit. Now, if I want to select more easily or efficiently, I can go and select with selection rectangles, which is similar to other CAD programs, that if I go from left to right by creating my rectangle, it will select all of the elements that it completely encompass or that are completely inside of the selection rectangle. So you can see that this way I am selecting all the walls that are inside of my rectangle, and if I leave it, it will select them. If I go from right to left, it will create different type of selection rectangle that will create everything that it will pass through. It doesn't need to be fully encompassed, it just needs to be inside of the selection rectangle. Now let's create some different category. So we will create our lines, detail lines here, just to show you some other functionality. Let's go like this. And now if I select this all with my selection rectangle, you can see in the properties palette here that I have multiple categories selected. And the total is 22 elements. So if I want to filter this selection now and I want to select only my walls and I do not want to select my lines, I can go here on this tab and go with the filter selection, click it, and now you can see that I can filter my categories away. So now you can see the practical application of the categories in Revit because you can filter by them. So if I would have more categories in here, I could filter them also. So I will check away the lines, and this way I have only the walls selected. You can see it here, total items selected is 9 pieces. So if I hit OK, I reduce my selection, I filtered my selection to be only walls and not other elements. Revit works in the way that you cannot tell it to filter right away, that I would say now, let's say that I want to select only walls and I will select only walls. Revit cannot do this. Revit can only filter the selection after you have selected the things. So if you select more things, then afterwards you can filter them away. Now there is a thing called, let's call it tab selecting. that if you have multiple things to choose from, I will go in this example with a floor. I will create really quickly just to show you a floor here. And now you can see that on this edge, I can choose either a wall or a floor, and I will create even, let's go here with the detail line. I will create as well a detail line at the same edge. So at this one edge here, at this edge, I have edge of a floor, edge of a wall, and there is a detail line in there. So I have 3 elements in Revit which I can choose from when selecting. So when I hover around here, you can see that now I have a preview for a detail line to be selected. If I hit my tab key now, I will switch through the things that Revit considers me for the selection. So this way now I can choose my wall, and if I hit my tab key again, I can choose my floor. So you can see that if I'm hitting my tab key, I am switching through different selection previews which Revit gives me for the selection. Okay, now when I was hitting my tab key here, you can see that sometimes all walls are highlighted, and this is one thing that comes handy when you are creating things with the chain command selected. So if we go back to the architecture tab, to wall selection, to wall tool, from the previous section, you can know that this thing chain is creating the chain of walls. And if I create my walls with this chain selected, like this, and they are joined together, later when I am trying to select them, if I hit my tab key, you can see that I am able to select the chain of walls. So I can select here all of the chain of these walls, and if I hit my left mouse button, it will select them all. The same goes in here. You can see that I can preview and select all walls at the same time. I cannot do this here in this example because they are not joined, and if I go here and hit my tab key, nothing happens, and I can only select them one by one. So you can see right now the advantages of using the chain and joins. The same applies for any different types of elements which are chained together. For example, these lines. If I hover around the line here, you can see that I can select them. Now if I hit my tab key, you can see that I have highlighted the chain of all of the lines together, and you can select them in one go. This is super useful, and I'm using it almost all the time in the projects because it will save you a lot of time. This tab selecting and selection of the chains is also useful when you are creating elements. So if I go back to my wall tool, to my pick lines command, and now if I select this line, I can also hit my tab key and select all of the lines in the chain, and this way I can create all of the walls based on this chain of lines in one go if I hit now my mouse button. So you can see that it is speeding up your workflows a lot. I will undo this change. And I will now show you a few important settings from which can be found down here. And the most important two are this one and this one. And let's see what they do. So first of all, we'll go with this setting, which is drag elements on selection, which this thing is allowed, so it doesn't have this small cross, this X here. It is allowed, and what it does is that it will allow you to move the element on the selection. What it means is that, let's first go without the selection. So it is now turned off. And if I'm going with my selection rectangle, so I'm starting from here, holding my mouse button and going to right, you can see that I am creating my selection rectangle, and what is inside, it is selected. But if I try to do the same thing now with this setting allowed, and I start on my floor, and I do the same thing, you can see that I'm not creating a rectangle, but I'm moving my floor away. And this is because with this setting, I do not need to select the element first. I can just drag it on the selection in one go. So again, see the difference with this setting selected. I will just drag it. With this disallowed, unselected, I will create my selection window. So this setting in my office, I am always turning it off for everyone because it is creating a lot of mistakes in the projects, and the user can unintentionally move things without even knowing about it. The second is the select elements by face. If I turn it off and I go here on this floor, you can see that now when I'm inside of the floor area or of the floor surface, I cannot select it. I can only select it if I go on the edge of the floor. If I turn this on and I go back here, you can see that I have the preview for selection of the floor even when I'm inside of the floor and when I'm in the floor like surface or floor area. So me personally, when I'm working, I'm always having this one turned on and this one turned off. The next setting, which can help you prevent from movement of some things unintentionally, can be found here on the Modify tab. If you select a thing, let's say I will select this floor, and I will go here to this setting here, this one, which is pin, and I click it, I will pin this element. And what this means is that you can see even a graphic representation of the pinned element here. This has a little pin here, and you can see that we will prevent the change of element position. So if I now try to move this, even with the move command, you can see that I get an error that I cannot move pinned element. So this should help to prevent unintentional movement of elements in your project. If I want to move it, I have to first click on this to unpin it, or I would need to click here to unpin it, so I can pin and unpin. And now I can go with my move command and move it somewhere else. Now, when we were talking about selecting, there is also one super useful and super important thing when it comes to selection, and that is select all instances. So if I click on this wall and now I right click with the mouse button, I get some menu here, and I can go to select all instances and visible in view or in entire project. Visible in view will select all of the instances of this wall type in the view, which I have opened now, and it is my active view. In the entire project, it will select all of the elements in entire project, regardless of if I see them or do not see them. So let's go with the visible in view. And if I zoom out, now you can see that I was effectively being able to select all of the walls here, which are of the type generic 200 millimeters, and you can see there is 65 of them. So this is a really quick way of selecting things in your Revit project. And again, you can see the power of the types and instances and the categories in your Revit project, because you can see that it selected all of the elements, all of the instances of the same type, but it didn't select the walls from a different type. So if I now go here and do the same thing, select all instances visible in view, you can see that it selects all of the elements or instances of this wall type generic 300 millimeters, which are in this view, but it did not select the walls from a different type. Okay, let's go back here now and let's talk a little bit about snaps in Revit. So if I'm now again trying to create a new wall, you can see that I have some previews here, some cross and things which are snaps. So you can see here I have some snapping, here some snapping, and here I have some intersection for these two snaps, which is giving me some position which I can choose from. So if we want to set those things, we can go to manage snaps, and here you can see all of the snaps inside of the Revit project. Me personally, I would not turn off any of those snaps because they are useful. And here those snaps are telling you about the increases which you can do automatically with your temporary dimensions. So let's talk first about those. You can set them, but basically what they tell you is that if I'm creating my wall here, you can see that it is now snapping for the increases of 100 millimeters. And these are those snaps which are set here in the snaps tool. And the same goes with the angle. So like basically you do not need to change this, but you should be aware of its existence. The next important thing is that when you are doing something and let's say you come close here, it will give you different types of snaps. And again, you can hit your tab key to cycle through different snap options until you get the right one. In this example, I want to go to the middle. So this way you can use your snaps inside of your Revit project. Now let's talk about modify tools. So when you are working in your Revit project, here under the modify tab, you have some tools here on the modify category, and we will talk about them now. So first of all, one of the most important ones is the move tool. So if I select my element, I go with my move tool, and now I will select the start of the movement and the end of the movement. I can just do it with the mouse, or I can write the exact number by typing it into my keyboard and hitting OK. Now what you can do with the move command when I will go with the move again is to look here, as I told you before, on the options bar. You can see some settings here. One of them is constraint, one is disjoint, and one is multiple. What this means is that if I go with my constraints, select it, and I want to move this, you can see that it will give me some constraints, and I cannot move it like here. I can only move it in predefined constraints. Then there is this disjoint command, which tells you that, let's go with example here. If I move this wall with the setting like this, and I'm moving it, let's say somewhere here, you can see that it will automatically enlarge this connected wall to it. So it will recalculate the values based on the movement of this wall. But if I do the same thing with the disjoint selected, and I move this wall now, you can see that it will like disconnect from this wall when you move it. So this wall will not stay connected and associated with this wall. So this is the setting with the move command when you select the disjoin. I will unselect it now. Okay, let's just now take a look at the copy tool. So if I select my wall, I will go with a nicer wall like this, and let's just go with copying it. Here you can see the same settings for the constraint and disjoin, and now there is one more setting here for the multiple. So if I go with the multiple unselected and I copy this wall, let's say 1000 millimeters, by typing it, I have copied the wall on the next slot and the tool is deactivated. Now if I select it again and I check the multiple to be selected, and I am now copying it the same way as before, 1000 millimeters, you can see that with the multiple selected, I can continue copying the wall as I want. So if I will just go around and click like this, you can see that with the multiple, I can continue copying the element in Revit. With multiple unchecked, you can do it only one time. Okay, now the offset. Basically what it does is that if I select this wall and select my offset, it will offset from this wall either graphically or numerically. If I go numerically, I can set the value here, let's say 1200 millimeters, and you can see in the preview here that it is giving me the preview of the offset position of the wall. Or I can go, if I hover around on the next side, you can see now that it is on this side, so it will be offset in this direction. Here the copy will tell me if it will copy the element, so if I do it with the copy selected, you can see I have a copy of the element. If I do it with copy unselected, it will offset the element from its position to a different position. The graphical one is just that I will go, select, and offset it graphically where I want it. Now let's go with the rotate tool. I have a wall here. I will move it a little bit. And let's select our rotate tool. So you can see that when I start rotating, I have the center of rotation, which is this blue dot here, already placed. And if I now click with the mouse button and click with the mouse button again, you can see that I am rotating my element based on the value of the angle. So I just rotated the element around the center of rotation. You can go and do the same thing. The disjoin means the same as with the walls. The copy is the same as with the copy command. So basically, if I want to create a rotated copy of this, I will select this value here on the options bar to copy it. And now if I rotate this, you can see that I have created a rotated copy of this wall inside of the Revit project. Okay, now let's go back here and let's go again with a rotate tool. If I do not want to rotate only graphically, I can as well write the number here. So let's say I want to rotate this 45 degrees. I can just go and start writing 45, hit enter, and it will rotate 45 degrees for me. I will undo this change, select it, hit the rotate again. I will undo the copy and I will undo the disjoin as well. And now let's say that I want to change the center of rotation, that I do not want to rotate it around this point here, but I would like to rotate it around, let's say, this point here. So I need to change the center of the rotation. I can do it either by hitting the place command here and place it on this point. Now the center of the rotation is here. Or if I go back, okay, too much back. Or if I want to do it different way, I can just click on it with the mouse button, left click and click again. Or I can hit my spacebar and place it somewhere else. For me personally, the quickest one is to hit the spacebar and just place it somewhere else. This way I have placed my center of rotation to a different place, so it is now here and not here as it was before. So this way I can go and just rotate around this point, my wall, to a different position. Now we have a mirror with the pick axis, which lets you mirror this wall around the axis which is existing in the project. Again, you have here the change to select the copy or not to copy. So with the copy selected, if I mirror it around this wall, you can see it created a mirror copy. If you go with the mirror copy unselected, it will just mirror the thing and not copy it. Now there is a mirror tool with the draw axis tool. That means that if you do not have the axis of mirror already existing in the project, you can just draw it and mirror this way. So let's say that I would like to mirror this around an axis here, which is not existing in the project. I can select this tool. The setting is the same. Let's go with the copy. And I can just now draw my axis. And it will mirror around the drawn axis. So if I will draw it like this, you can see it will mirror on the next side. So you can just do or draw your mirror axis as you want it. Okay, the next important thing is the trim extend to corner. This thing, what it does is that if you have some walls like this and you want to connect them to form a corner, like here, you do not need to manually do it and just modify it with the blue dots like this to stretch the walls. You can select this tool, select the first wall, select the second wall, and you can see that it will give you the preview of the result. So in this way, you can see that it will do it like this. If I go with different one, let's go here. I will make it a little bit more longer so we will better able to see it. So if I go here now, you can see that now it previews that it will create something like this. So if I hit it now, you can see it has created a corner between these two walls. I can do the same with those walls and basically with any other elements. It doesn't need to be only walls. I can do the same with my lines here and just connect them. Little bit strange thing about this tool for me was that you cannot do anything else than the corner. That if you try to do a fillet, you have to actually do it with different tool, not with this trim to extend corner, but you have to create this fillet arc tool to be able to connect them with the fillet. Okay, so let's go back to our modify tab and let's draw a detail line here. And let's say that I want to have all of these walls to be in the length that they will be touching this detail line. So if I go to my modify tab, I can use a command here to trim extend single element or trim extend multiple elements. If I go with the trim extend single element, first you will select the reference and then onto this reference you will extend this wall. You can see again the preview of what will be the result. If I do it, you can see that it enlarged the wall to meet with my detail line. I can go and do this one by one like this, but I need to always click first for the reference and then for the element I want to apply this for. If I do not want to always click the reference again and again and again, I can just hold down my control button on the keyboard and you can see the change here. If I hold the control key, you can see that there is one more line in the cursor. And that will tell you that it will automatically remember the reference and you can just go and continue clicking different elements and it will trim or extend them to this line. The next, what you can use is trim extend multiple elements command, and if I move this wall or this line now here to this position and I want to shorten all of these walls up to this line, I can go with this setting or this tool, select the line, and now with my selection rectangle I can select all of the walls and it will trim them at the same time. The next important thing here is this split element command. Basically what it means is that, let's say that I have a wall here and it is too large and I do not want to have it that big. I want to create two separate walls from this wall, so I can use my split element tool. And you can see again the preview that gives you the result that you can see that it is cutting on this wall, it is cutting in this position, and it will basically give you one wall like this and the other one like this. So if I cut it now, you can see that I effectively created one wall and the other wall from the previous wall. So I have now two elements, separate elements from a pre-existing wall. I can go with this split line or split element tool and just continue clicking, and you can see that I'm creating more and more walls from the larger wall. Then there is a setting called delete inner segment here, this one, which if you select it and you click with first click and now the second click, you can see that it has deleted the inner space between my two clicks from this wall, and it did not create just like splitting, but it deleted the element between them. If I uncheck this and I do the same thing and click again, you can see that now the portion between the two clicks remained in the project. Okay, there is a split with gap. I will not talk about this. I probably never used it, so it is not that important. And then there is array and scale. The scale is just that you will scale something either graphically or numerically. Basically, Revit says that the scale can be used only for lines, walls, images, DVGs, and DXF imports, reference planes, and the position of dimensions. So you cannot actually use this a lot. Me personally, I do not even know if I have used this ever. Maybe in family creation, but not in the project. Most of the times I use it if I have some image imported, I will scale it with this tool. So let's go with our wall example here. If I select it, let's hit the scale. I will go with the graphical one with the beginning and the end. So now you can see that I am scaling my wall graphically. Okay, now let's talk about the array, which is this thing here. This is also pretty handy this thing can actually speed you a lot of your modeling. So let's just now copy this here. And let's imagine that I want to create 10 copies of this wall, which will be running in this direction, and they will be all spaced the same distance, let's say 1000 millimeters. So I can go and create it with copy tool with multiple selected and just go and type 1000, then again 1000, then again 1000, and do this 10 times. As you can see, it's not that quick, so I can do it differently. And I will undo this. And I can use for this task an array tool. So I will select the wall, check the array, and now here on the options bar, I have many settings. The first one I will talk about a little bit later. First, let's talk about the number and the move to second or move to last. So first, move to second means that you will define the distance between the first and the second item in the array. The last tells you that you will define the distance between the first and the last item in the array. I will show you what this actually means. Here on the numbers, you can select that if you want to have total of 2 elements or 3 elements or 4 elements or 6 copies and so on and so forth. So we'll go with the 5 and let's leave this to be moved to the second. So if I now move this wall, let's go 1000 millimeters. In this way it will be to the second. So it will create one wall which will be 1000 millimeters away, and then another one which will be 1000 millimeters away, and another until it will be 5 of them in total. So if I hit my enter key now, you can see it has created 5 walls which are equally distanced 1000 millimeters between each other. Now if I will go again with another wall here, and I will use the array, but this time I will go with the last setting and I will leave this number to be the same, 5, and I will move this to the same position. So here, hit enter. You can see that on the first side it looks the same, but the behavior or the relationship between those two arrays is different. And the difference is in that if I click on this now, you can see that I have a number here, which if I change, this all group will respond to the change of this parameter value. So let's change this to be 10. And now you can see that it automatically created other copies with the same distance between each other on this way. Whereas if I go here, where I have created this with the last command, and I change this to be 10, you can see that it has created 10 copies, but it has created between the first and the last element. So if you are using your, let's go back to draw a wall here. And let's go with the array. So if you are using your array with the setting of the last, this one here, it will create the copies between the first element and the last element, and it will try to squeeze all of those numbers which you will set in here between these two elements. Whereas if you use the move to second, you will select the first element, the second element. There will be some fixed distance between them. And if you change this number, which will be here, it will create the copies of those elements based on the same distance. So it will continue in this direction until it will reach the desired number of elements. So this is the difference between move to last and move to second. Now this thing that it stays associated, and you can change it by changing the value of the number here, and it recalculates automatically, and it has this connection. This is actually also a setting of an array tool. So if I go here to my array, here you can see I have checked the group and associate button. So this group and associate creates a group from these elements, and it gives you the control to edit them later, as well as from those elements and to edit them later. If I uncheck this value, it will only create the array of copies, but it will not retain the relationship. So if I do the same thing here now with this group and associate unselected, and I move this 1000 millimeters, you can see it created the copies, but if I click on them, you can see that they are separate copies and they are not in any other way connected or associated with each other. Whereas with the group and associate command, if I click on the element, you can see that it gives me the possibility to change this parameter and to play with this group. The good thing about this grouping is that if you move now, let's say this element, you can see that it is automatically recalculating the relationship between those elements in this group. The same goes with this, that if I move it, it will automatically recalculate the values for me because it stays connected and parametric. Whereas if I move with the wall here, nothing changes because it is unconnected together. Let's say that you have created a group like this, but you do not want to have it grouped now. You can just select it all and hit the ungroup here, and this way you will break the connection between them, and now it will be separate elements again, and you can just modify them one by one. So now let's take a look on the array with a different setting, and that is those two settings. This one is for the linear one, which we were using here in this example. So it was linear. And then there is another one which is on the circle. So let's go, first let's move this a bit away, and I will zoom here, and let's go with our array button here. So I can choose the radial now, and you can see the same settings, group and associate, the number, the move to command last. Now the new things are the angle and center of rotation. I will place my center of rotation on a different spot, so I will hit my spacebar, place it here. I will create 5 copies, and I will go with the move to last. So I will go with my first and my last position. So you can see that this is the position of the first element. This is the preview of the position of the last element. So it will create between this and this element elements like wall here, and wall here. And it will be total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, because I have it set here. And because it is the setting of the last, it will be between the first and the last element. So if I now hit my mouse button, you can see it has created 5 elements which are rotated around the center of rotation with this array command. And now last but not least, and this is probably one of the most important things in here, is the align. So let's say that you have a wall, or let's create a new detail line here. And let's create a new wall here, which will be a little bit away. And let's say that I want to align this wall with this line. So I could do it like manually like this, but this is a lot of work. I can use for this align tool, and I will set my reference first with the first click, and then I will set my wall. I can go, you can see, with one face, center line, or another face. I will go with this face in this example, and you can see that it aligned the wall based on my reference from the detail line. You can do the same thing with the walls as well. So let's say I would go to align this wall to this wall. So I will hit first my reference and then my wall, and it will align them together. I can continue aligning, and now you can see I have them together. I can align as well in this way. I have a reference and I will align this, so now I know that they are aligned in the same direction. So this align tool is really useful, and you can actually use it for all of the elements. I can align my floor here and so on and so forth. There is few other settings which can be found here, but I will not talk about them now in the beginnings to not confuse you too much. But just for the moment, remember that you should always have this lock unchecked, and this multiple alignment can be unchecked as well. This multiple alignment thing will tell you that if you use this, you have to go and select the reference again and again. If you have the multiple alignment, you do not need to select the reference again, and you can just click and keep aligning. Now, after we have seen the tools in the Modify tab here, let's just now talk about the shortcuts in Revit. So I have created here a list of useful default shortcuts. I have sorted them from the most used to the least used when we are talking about how much me personally I'm using these shortcuts. You have here some default window shortcuts and then some my personal shortcuts for the tools which are not set by the default in Revit. Me personally, I advise you to always use the default Revit shortcuts in your office as much as it is possible, because if you then switch computers or you need to go to help your colleague or colleague needs to help you and you have different shortcuts, you will not be able to use Revit effectively. So if you are using the same shortcuts in your office, it is always best to use the default Revit shortcuts because they will be the same for everyone. So we will go now one by one with all of the shortcuts and what they do. Some of them we will talk about more detail. Some of them we will talk about later when we will be telling about actually these things which they represent. So let's just now start here with the VV or VG. This is the visibility graphics overrides. I will also tell you one thing, that the shortcuts in Revit works in the way that when you press these two buttons or the two keys for the shortcut, it will automatically activate the thing which it represents. So you do not need to confirm it by pressing any other key, which can be different as in some other softwares. Okay, so first is the VV. It will open you the visibility graphics overrides panel. We will talk about this later, but just now know that the VV or VG will open you this thing. Then there are shortcuts for the hiding, isolating of the elements, reset temporary, isolate category, reveal hidden. And there is another one for the hide in view permanently. These all are the modification of what you can see in your view. And we will talk about this a little bit later when we will be practicing these things. Then there is this box view. This is really cool thing. And we will take a look on this now. So if I go back to my walls and I select a wall, here on this modify tab under the view, here you can see this icon, which is the box view. Also, if I hover around it, you can see the shortcut written here in the parentheses. Basically, with all of the tools that have the shortcut associated to them, you can see it written also here. So I'm going to use this BX shortcut, and now I'm pressing the BX, and you can see that it opened the 3D view, but this 3D view is modified by this thing here, and this thing is called the section box. So let's just now go back to the default 3D view. So this is something we have already seen, and let's just now imagine that you do not want to see all of this geometry in your 3D view. You only want to see, let's say, this part. So the way you can do this in 3D is by using the section box parameter here. So if you check the section box, it will give you a section box which looks something like this, which is basically just a box with some shape handles which you can use to modify the box, and there is also a handle to rotate this box. So if I hold my left mouse button and rotate it, you can see that there is actually no preview, so this is not that good. But I can rotate my section box this way. If I will go back to where it was, I can use this section box to effectively cut what I see in the view. So if I make it smaller, check now here that this part of the geometry will disappear and you will only be able to see this one. So if I finish it, you can see that now I am effectively cutting my geometry. The same goes for the height. So if we take a look like this, and if I lower my section box, and you can see always the preview of what it will do. Now I am basically cutting the geometry of my walls, but only in this view. It is not like being cut actually in the model, but in the view. So the section box thing here is used to manipulate the extents of the 3D view for you to be able to see only what you want to see. And if I go back to my BX shortcut example, if I select this wall, or let's say that I will select all of these walls and I press my BX shortcut, you can see that it opened the 3D view and it automatically created the section box around the selected elements. So if I place this side by side and do it again, so now you can see that I have a section box around these elements. So let's say I will select those elements which I now cannot see in the 3D view because they are cut by the section box. But if I select them and press my BX shortcut, you can see that it automatically created a 3D view around the selected elements. And this way I am able to find them more easily in the project. This shortcut is super useful when you are working in a project, because when you will have large projects and many things inside of the 3D view, this way you can easily find them and only concentrate on what you actually need to see because many times you do not need to see the whole project. So I will close this now, and let's continue with our shortcuts. Then there is a create similar. We will talk about this now as well. So let's say that I want to create a wall like this. If I go the way without the shortcut, I will need to go to my architecture tab, select my wall tool. In my type selector, select the appropriate type of the wall and create a wall. But I can use the shortcut for create similar. I can use this actually for all of the elements, but we have talked only about the walls now. So if I select my wall, hit my CS shortcut, now you can see that it automatically picked a wall with the same type as this wall by pressing the CS shortcut. So this way I am effectively creating the same wall as this one. If I go to my example here with this wall and I select it, and again I press my CS shortcut, now you can see that I'm creating the same type of wall as this one. So this is also super useful shortcut. Okay, then there is a copy. We have seen this in our modify tab. Align as well. Dimension, we will talk about this later. Move command, rotate, split line, trim, extend to corner. We have seen all of those in the previous section. Then there is a pick a plane. We will be talking about this later. This is a new shortcut in Revit 2024. In previous versions, it was not present. Then there is draw mirror axis. We have also seen it in the previous version. Then there are shortcuts for detail line and model line. Let's just now go with these two shortcuts and these two things, detail and model line, little bit at the beginning of this course. And back to our presentation. So if you remember, we have talked about the Revit elements and that there are model elements, datum elements, and view specific elements. Model and datum elements are 3D elements and they are visible in all views. Here goes the model line. Then there are view specific elements which are only visible in the view where you create them, and there goes this detail line. So if we go back here and let's see it in the example, I will open my 3D view. I will go with a view tile side by side so we will be able to see it better. I will turn off this section box here so we can see all extents. And let's just now go here next to our walls. And let's go with this example of detail line first. You can find the detail line under the annotate tab here, detail line. Or you can see again by pressing the DL shortcut. So I am pressing the DL shortcut and I'm creating a line. And as I'm creating it, you can see that it is being created in my view here. But here in 3D, I cannot see anything. And that is because this is a detail line and it is only specific for this one view, for this level 1. And you cannot see it in any other view. Whereas if I go with my model line, I can find it here under architecture tab, model line. You can see again the shortcut is also written here. Or I can go with my shortcut LI. And now I'm creating a line which on the first side can look the same way as my detail line. But you can see the difference here directly in the 3D view, what this does. So if I start creating my model line, you can see here that is being created in the 3D view as well. So this way, I am able to see this line in all of the views which will be generated from this model, because it is actually being created in the 3D. So this line is view specific. I cannot see it in any other view than the level 1 or the view where I have created it. And this one is model line, so I can see it in all of my views. I will close this again, continue with our shortcuts. Pin unpin. We can see this as well. We've been talking about this before in the selection section, but let's go back. If I select my line or any other element, I can go here in the modify tab and select my pin to pin it, or again I can use the shortcut PN. So I will use the shortcut PN, and you can see now there is a small pin which is telling me that this is pinned. This preventing me from moving it. You can see that I get an error, or I cannot even delete it because it is pinned. So I need to first unpin it to be able to do this, and I can do it either by clicking on this unpin button or by clicking here on this unpin icon, or by pressing the UP shortcut. So I go with the UP shortcut, and this way I can now delete my line. Okay, let's go back to our shortcuts. Room tag, tag by category, line work. We'll be talking about this later. Also, match type properties. The move command with the control selected or pressed. This is also a nice one to move a copy. So let's go with example here with this wall. If I select it and I press my MV shortcut, I can just move it, and you can see that I moved the element. I cannot actually do anything else with the move command. But if I do the same thing and I press the MV shortcut, or I use the button here, and now let's just take a look here what will happen. Now we can see that this thing is grayed out, so I cannot change this. But if I press my control key and hold it, you can see that it actually now got activated. And this way I am able to move a copy. So you can see that I was not moving the element, but I am actually effectively copying the element by using the move command. I can basically do the same with the copy command. If I go with my CO shortcut, I can do the same. But sometimes this move and copy is useful because it can speed you things. And one of the examples is, let's say, if I want to move this wall, I do not need to use the move command. I can just press the left mouse button and hold it and start moving with my cursor. So you can see that this way I am moving this wall without actually using the move command. And this way I can use this to copy without using this command. So I can just press down my control button. You can see the plus icon next to my cursor. And now if I move this by pressing and holding and moving it, you can see that I'm creating a copy of this wall. So sometimes this is useful. Okay, let's go back. Then there is a text. We will be talking about this later. Then there is select all instances in entire project. We have been talking about this in previous sections. Basically, this is the shortcut for the thing that goes with right click the mouse button, going to select all instances and entire project. This is the shortcut SA. And then there is a visible in view, but by default, there is no shortcut for this. Me personally, I have created a shortcut for this, which goes with the SI, select all instances visible in view, because I am not using that much select all instances in entire project, but in visible in view, I'm using a lot. So let's just now see how we can create our own shortcut. If we go to a file, here in the options, I have it on the next screen. Okay, so if we go to the user interface tab, and here under the keyboard shortcuts, you click customize, you will see the keyboard shortcut dialog. Here you can see all of the commands in Revit and the shortcuts that are associated to them. Some of them have no shortcuts. So we will search for our select all instances. Oh, sorry. Again. Select all. And here you can see if I move this to be better able to see it all. There is my command select all instances visible in view. And me, I have already created a shortcut SI for this. If you want to create a shortcut for some shortcuts which are not present, if you select the row, here you can see that I can press new key and I will hit the plus assign button, and this way I will assign a shortcut here. The same thing, I can remove the shortcut so it is cleared, and I can create this a new shortcut and use this. So hit OK, and I will hit OK again. So this way you can use the keyboard shortcuts to create your own shortcuts. Okay, now let's just go with the unhide element. We will be talking about this later. Zoom to fit, this is also pretty useful. So you can see that now I am zoomed only to this text, but if I want to zoom in the way that I will see everything that is to see in this view, I can go and press my ZE shortcut, and you can see that it automatically zoomed away, so I will be able to see all of the things that are here present. If I zoom again and press the ZE, you can see that it zooms to the extent. Okay, next one is array. We're talking about this in the modify. Then there is mirror peak axis, offset. This is also in the modify. Tile windows. This one is really nice. This is the one that I'm using when I am showing you something side by side. So you can see I have two windows open. Now if I press my WT, they will be opened side by side. And many times it is useful when you are modeling something to be able to see it side by side, or you can place it by dragging it onto the next screen and work this way. Me personally, I'm using this a lot, working side by side with the 3D view or with section views. Then there is a control key plus left arrow key, which is for the select previous selection. This is also pretty handy. Basically, if I select those things and now I unselect it, and let's imagine that I have created a really complicated selection that it took me a lot of time, because sometimes it is just like that, and I misclicked and I deselect the things. I can go with my shortcut pressing and holding the control, and now with my left arrow key on the keyboard, and I will be selecting the previous selection. I can do the same thing by right clicking the mouse button and choosing select previous. This way I am able to select previous selection. Okay, the last one is to hit enter to repeat the last command. So basically, if I'm here, let's go with our wall, creating a wall, and I escape from this with the hitting escape button, and I want to do this again, and I do not want to again press the things, I can just hit my enter key and start with this. Me personally, I'm not using this a lot, but for someone can be useful. Then there are some default window shortcuts, which is Ctrl plus C plus copy, Ctrl V to paste, Ctrl S to save the project here, Ctrl X is to cut to clipboard, and Ctrl Z to undo the undo command. Cut to clipboard, the difference between copy to clipboard and cut to clipboard can be seen in here. If I select this wall and go with Ctrl plus C, I'm copying this to clipboard. The element stays in the file. And now Ctrl V and I can place the element. Whereas if I go and do the same with the Ctrl plus X, it copied to the clipboard, but it deleted the original element. And now with the Ctrl V, I can place it again. Okay, now for my own shortcuts, create section view. We'll be talking about this a little bit later, but basically section views are really handy also when you are working, not only like for the final presentation, but for the working purposes. Then there is join geometry, multi-category tag. We will be talking about this later. Extend or trim single element, which is under the modify tab, this thing. We were talking about this. I am using this one actually quite a lot. That's why I have created a shortcut for it. And then there is a measure tool where I have created a M, where you have to hit the spacebar to confirm this. So now when we are here in this measure tool, let's talk about how you can actually measure in Revit, because it is a little bit confusing at the first sight. So let's go with this example here with our model lines. And let's say that I want to measure this model line and I want to measure the angle between these model lines. So what I have here under the modify tab here, you can see that this is the measure between two references, or the same thing can be found here. So if you click it, you can just go and start from any place basically. Let's go from the end point and let's go to this end point. And you can see while I am actually moving the cursor, the distance is being recalculated, and you can find the same distance here in the options bar. So if I now hit my left mouse button to the end, this way I have fixed the measurement and you can see the result here as well as here. If I want to start a new measurement, I just go and start clicking again. So this way you can measure things like between 2 points. But let's say, okay, I want to now measure the angle here. So if I try to use this measure between two references, you can see that I'm not getting any angle. And the only angles I'm getting here now are from this cardinal direction, this X direction inside of the Revit. And I cannot actually get it to be measured from here like this. So I will be able to see how many degrees is between here and here. So I cannot actually use this to measure. You can see that when I'm rotating this, the temporary dimension is showing me always from the X distance. So I cannot use this effectively to measure the angle between these two lines. So if I try to find something else, there is nothing else here. So the only thing that I can use actually in Revit for measuring angles is to use the dimensions. So now let's talk about dimensions a little bit and how they work. You can see under the modify tab in the measure, they even have the dimension, or you can find it under annotate tab. And here there is a whole space for dimensions. and we will be talking now only about some of them. Let's go with the aligned, angular, radial, and diameter one. And the others we will be talking probably later. But now these four can be used to measure, so we'll be talking about them now. So let's go with our angle dimension. You can again see the shortcut DI. So I will be using shortcuts. I'm pressing DI. Now I'm in my dimension. And you can see here in this modify tab where I can choose from different types of dimensions. Now I'm using this one, the aligned one. So if I want to measure something or dimension something in Revit, if I hover around this line, you can see that it highlights. And the thing that it highlights, that it is bluish, is telling me that it is trying to get a start of this dimension from this place. So this is the reference for my dimension. If I click it with my mouse button, you can see that it starts creating a dimension from this reference. But let's say, okay, I do not want to create a dimension from here to somewhere else because I want to dimension actually this line. So I need to start from endpoint to another endpoint. The way to do it is by hovering around here, and now I am pressing my tab key. So you can see that this way I'm switching between the references that Revit is giving me for the dimension to start. Now here you can see, if I zoom it, this little blue dot, so it is telling me that this point will be the reference point for my dimension, and I need to select also this point here, so I will be able to create it. So if I go and hit my tab key, I have the first point, you can see it in the preview, and I go to my second point, and you can see that it is giving me different references. So I am hitting my tab key to cycle through them, and this way you can see that it's giving me different references to pick from. So I will choose one point, and this way it has created a dimension, so I can measure the distance of this line. For the linear dimensions or the linear things, it is actually easier to use the measure tool because I can just go and pick things. But now let's take a look on the angle. So again, if I go with my DI shortcut and I choose now my angular dimension, I do the same thing. I go, I can now see my reference. I click it with my mouse button. This is my first reference. And now you can see that there is no preview, but I can click my second reference now, and this will be this line here. This way I am creating a dimension here. I can, if I just want to see it like this, I do not have to actually create it. I can just see it now, or I can click again, and this way I have created the dimension in here. So I know that this is now 115 degrees apart. If I have something, let's go and create a detail line with the shortcut DL. And let's create the start end radius arc like this. And let's just measure this thing here. I will go with my DI shortcut, choose my radial dimension, select it, and you can see that this way I get a radius, or I can go and select my diameter. Again, click it, and this way I am able to see the diameter. Okay, now let's talk about how you can measure something more. Let's say that I would like to measure all of those lines together. Like, what is the total length of those lines? So if I'm going to use the dimension thing, I will have to actually calculate it. If I want to just select the line, you can see here the length of the line. But if I select another line, by adding to my selection, you can see that the length varies and I cannot see the total length here. So I cannot use this way. But what I can use is to use my measure tool and change one small setting here, this chain thing. If I will now select this, you will be able to see here in the total length, the total length of the measurement. So without the chain selected, if I'm measuring and clicking, you can see that it's always creating a measurement between 2 points where I clicked. Whereas if I change this and select it, and now if I'm doing the same thing, I'm clicking with my left mouse button and I'm continuing, you can see that it is not being measured only between the 2 clicks, but it is continuing to be measured. So if I go like this, you can see now here, this is the dimension for this element, this is dimension for this element, and so on and so forth. But what we are interested in is this thing here. You can get the total length here. So if I go back, I can just go around this by clicking with the chain selected and click around all of this. And at the end, you can see the total length here. The little disadvantage of this is that if I do it again, that if I'm continuing to measure, you can see that when I'm moving, this number here is being recalculated. So if I want to get the number that is here, I have to actually stay at the point because I cannot say to stop. If I go with the cancel, it will cancel all of it. Cancel again. So this is a little bit disadvantage. But this way the chain selection works. I will undo this because if you leave it there, always when you will be using the measure between 2 references, it will stay selected. So I will unselect it. Now let's talk about how to measure in 3D, because this is in the plan view. And let's go to our 3D view. I will zoom in and let's say that I want to measure between these 2 walls. If I go with my measure tool here, this is only possible in Revit 2024. In previous versions of Revit, this was not possible to measure in 3D. You had to use a different way, which I will show you a little bit later. But in Revit 24, you can just go and select first point, second point, and this way you can measure in 3D as well. So this is pretty nice, and I was waiting for this actually a long time. Okay, and the second way to measure in 3D is by using dimensions again. But here comes a tricky part in Revit, because when you are working in 3D, you have to work in some workplanes. So we will be talking about the workplanes now and what are they and how to use them in Revit. Basically, if you are in floor plan or section view or any other view, you already have the workplane set. So you do not need to do this and you will be automatically working in like a plane. But if you go to 3D, you can see that Revit needs to know which plane to use to create the dimension and measure in there, because it can only measure in a plane. For this, there is a setting here under the architecture tab, this one, work plane, where you can either show and set the work planes and so on and so forth. So let's just now go with showing the work plane. So you can see that now in my 3D view, this blue thing, work plane grid, represents my work plane of this view. So now if I'm using my dimension tool, I am pressing my DI shortcut, and I'm trying to get the dimension, let's say from this wall to this wall. Again, you can see with the bluish preview the references that it is picking. So I will again press tab key to cycle through the references until I will get this side of the wall. So I am clicking. Now you can see even in the preview that it is highlighted. And if I'm going here to my next wall, you can see again I am getting a preview of what it gets me as a reference. So let's select, let's say, this edge, and you can see that it measured the distance. If I just place it, it measures the difference between this side of the wall and this edge here. But as you can see, it measured it in this work plane. So if I rotate this, you can see that the measurement was being done in this work plane. So let's say that I want to measure the height of this wall or to dimension it. So if I go with my dimension tool with pressing the DI shortcut, and I want to select the, let's say, this edge now, this bluish, okay. And let's go and select the second edge here. Now you can see that if I do this, even though I want to have a dimension like from here to here, I'm getting dimension 0 because it is being created in this blue work plane. So if I place this and I rotate this view from the top view, you can see that the 0 I get because it was being created in this work plane. So from this position, from this, let's rotate this. So from the position of the view like this, the distance between this part and this part is exactly 0 because it is above. So what I need to do is to change my work plane to be this side of the wall. So I need to have my work plane to be like this. This way I can measure and dimension from here to here. So how we can change the work plane in 3D view is by going here, work plane to set. And if I go here and set work plane, I will have the dialog to choose from some specified levels and so on and so forth. Or I can go here. This is also new in Revit 24. So in previous versions, it was not there. I can go with the pick plane. Pick a plane has a default shortcut PK. I have created a different one, which is PP. That is because of what I was using like in previous versions where there was no default shortcut for this. But let's just go with pick a plane. And now if I hover around with my cursor, you can see that it is giving me previews again of selection of the surfaces. Now here you can see this bluish selection, or I can hover around other walls and it will give me the preview. If I now click my left mouse button, you can see that the work plane from from this big plane changed here on this edge of this wall. So now this is my work plane. If I do not want to see it, I can just turn it off, but for the explain purposes, this is better, like this. And now if I'm creating my dimension with the DI shortcut, and I do the same thing as I did before, I will go from this edge, now pressing the tab key, this edge, you can see that now I am creating a dimension exactly as I have wanted. So this is how the pick a work plane or changing the work plane works in Revit. Now let's go back to level 1 and let's just say how we can use these dimensions to modify elements that are already created in Revit. So if you are doing something, let's say as we have talked about before, I have a wall and I'm creating the wall. Okay, I will use this one. I will go with the shortcut CS to create similar. And now I can just write my number here and it will be 1500 millimeters long. And I can go like this. And let's say I create another wall. And now I want to change this wall or this angle between these walls to be 120 degrees. I can select the wall and these blue things here, these dimensions are called temporary dimensions. And I can use them to modify the element after it was created. So I can just type in here the number and it will be moved. So let's go with our 120 degrees and you can see that it moved my ball, or it will move any other element the way that I will type in here. But sometimes these temporary dimensions are not actually like picking the right things. And that's where you can use your dimensions. So if I go back here and I go with my DI shortcut and I go with my angular dimension, I tab select the edge of the wall, hover around the next wall, tab select the edge. I create my 110 degrees dimension. Hit escape, hit escape. Now you can see that I have my dimension like this. If I select this, you can see I cannot modify anything. But if I select my wall, you can see that the dimension changed and it is now bluish. And I can write in here, let's say 120 degrees, and I can use this dimension to modify the elements in 3D. So I can go and let's say 150 or 120. And you can see because this is connected together and has a relationship, I can modify my dimension, or I can use my dimension to modify the geometry in my Revit file. Or it works also the other way around, that if I modify my geometry, you can see that the dimension is being automatically recalculated because it has this intelligent relationship between it. So the same goes for this one. If I change this, you can see that it's automatically being recalculated to reflect the changes in the geometry. So this way you can modify things in Revit, or elements and geometry in Revit. And I think you will be using this a lot, because me personally, I'm using it a lot to modify something inside of the Revit. And now let's talk about the shortcuts here for the isolate element, temporary, isolate category, and so on and so forth. So these things are good when you are working with complex projects and you have many things and you need to just filter them, because many times you do not need to see everything. And we will be doing this also later in the project. But now let's go with a little exercise to be able to see what this does. So if I select now this wall and I want to isolate this wall, I want to see only this wall and nothing else, I can go with my shortcut HI. And you can immediately see that now I am seeing only this wall in my view, and all the other walls, they have just disappeared. Also, the things that tells you that something is happening is this bluish rectangle around your view, and it is telling you temporary hide isolate mode is activated. When it is like this blue, it is activated. If you want to go back from this, that let's say you have done something and you want to see again everything there is, you need to get back from this temporary hide isolate mode, and you do this by pressing the HR shortcut. And you can see again I am back in normal view, and you can see it also that this bluish rectangle around my view disappeared. So HI, HR, again HR, HR. It works not only for one element, but let's say that I want to now isolate only these things, so I can go only with my selection, press the HI, and it will isolate the things in my selection, HR, back again. Now let's go with the IC shortcut, which is for isolate category. So if I select my wall, now again we go with our categories, which can be found here. This is a wall category. So if I now will isolate only the things that goes under this category. So if I go with my IC shortcut, you can see that my dimensions and my detail and model lines disappeared. I can go again because this is this bluish temporary hide isolate mode with HR back to my view. I can do the same with my lines. I can select the line, go with the IC shortcut. You can see that all of the walls and the text disappeared. I have this bluish rectangle thing. I can go with HR again back. Now let's go with the other way around. Let's say that I want to hide this thing because I cannot see through it. So I can select the thing and go with the shortcut HH. And you can see I am in the same temporary hide isolate mode. But this way I was not like isolating the wall that is here or that was here, but I was hiding only this view. Sorry, only this wall in this view, and only temporary. This is really important that this is only temporary, because I can always go back from this temporary mode by pressing the HR shortcut, and it will get back. So I can again select more things, press the HH, and they will disappear temporarily. Again, HR, they are back in view. Okay, so these were the hide element, temporary, isolate element, temporary, HR, reset this temporary isolate mode, isolate category to isolate temporarily the category. And then there is this reveal hidden elements and this EH, hide in view, but permanently. And this is the difference between those which are temporary and the permanent one. So if I select my wall and I go with my EH shortcut, you can see that it disappeared from the view, but I do not see any bluish rectangle here telling me this is the temporary view thing. So you can see that I was able to hide this, but this is not temporary, this is permanent. So if I continue, and again it goes with selecting, and I go with my H shortcut, I am hiding this, but permanently. It's not temporary because I do not see this bluish rectangle around here. So this way I can hide something if I really want to hide it, and we will see this later in the project that you sometimes need to do this. But let's say that, okay, I have hidden it, but I need to see it now. So how I can see it? I can use this RH shortcut, reveal hidden elements, and this will reveal the elements that are permanently hidden in Revit. So I go with my RH, and now you can see again the rectangle, but this one is red, and you can see here reveal hidden elements, but there is no temporary written here. So this way you can see now the elements that I have hidden in my view, but not temporarily, but permanently. So I can go back, select my element, and go with my right mouse button and go with unhide in view elements, or there is another shortcut for this, which is EU, and this will unhide it. And if you unhide it, you can see that it changed the color from this reveal hidden back to the original color. If you need to go away from these reveal hidden elements, you need to again press the RH shortcut. And now we are back in view. So let's do this again. First, the temporary hide and isolate. So first I want to hide something. I go with the HH shortcut. I'm in the temporary because it is blue. If I want to go back from this temporary, I go with my HR shortcut. If I want to isolate something, I go with my HI shortcut. I'm again in the temporary one, so I can go with the with the HR shortcut back to the view. I want to isolate category, I go with my IC shortcut. I have only walls. Again, back from the temporary. Now if I want to hide something permanently, and this is the difference between temporary and permanent, I go with my EH, and you can see there is no rectangle around, so they are hidden permanently. If I want to unhide them, I need to first reveal them, so I go with my RH shortcut. You can see this red rectangle around and the reveal hidden elements. These elements are now reddish, the same color as these reveal hidden elements. I can select them and go with EU, or going with the right mouse click and go unhide in view elements. Now I was able to unhide them, and I have to go back from these reveal hidden elements, so I go with RH again, and I'm back in view. You can do the same things here in this temporary hide isolate. This is the same thing, isolate element, hide element, but this is only for the temporary one. And you can use the reveal hidden elements here, which is the same as using the shortcut. But I'm encouraging you to learn the shortcuts for this, because like this hiding in view permanently, this one, you will not be using that much. But this temporary hiding and isolating, I'm using almost every day, all the time, because it is speeding the process of modeling quite a lot.